Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. I'm Christy Brower here with my sister, co host, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going great.
How's it going down there? I don't
I
know why
know.
I'm so
It's
much
like
higher
I'm
than
way
you on the
lower than you.
video.
I
like,
tried to sit up a little bit taller.
yeah, like sit up really straight. I'll kind of slouch.
There you go.
That's funny.
I am good. We camped all weekend and
We did.
gorgeous beginning autumn weather. And yeah, what
Yeah,
can I say? I mean,
I know. It was a lovely weekend. Lovely.
mhm.
Had a great time. We are
Well,
back
anyhow,
now.
one of our favorite cousins and her husband
Yes,
came and joined us, and we rarely get to see them. It was so much fun.
it
Yeah,
was. Yeah, it
all
was so
good.
nice.
Yeah.
I agree. All very good.
Well, we had a moose run right through camp.
We did, yes, we did,
We were
and
in good company.
that was about all of the wildlife we really had, which was kind of okay because
Today we took we had took a side by side ride. Do you know what those guys? Like a
yeah,
razor,
a
right?
razor, yeah.
And we came across a bunch of turkey vultures.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were seven, and they were like circling this cliff. And so then I had to look it up because what is a flock of turkey vultures?
Oh goodness, what is it?
Awake.
Awake. I
Uh
was
huh.
thinking it was going to be a funeral reference of some sort.
Hmm.
A wake of turkey vultures. Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So that was kind of fun. I don't know whose funeral they were, attending, but there must have been something dead that they were going after because there was a whole bunch of them all together. But that was
Oh, there
kind of
must
cool.
have been. That is very interesting. How cool.
Hmm.
Well, this is our Monday case, first case of the week. And
Yes.
we realize that there is an American serial killer, a very well known American serial killer we have not covered yet.
Hmm.
And that is Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. And so we decided we probably should have a little convo about grody old Ridgway.
Hmm. Super, super yucky guy. Yeah.
Yeah, super yucky. However, important to remember for the sake of his victims,
Hmm.
and also for I think really Ridgway has contributed a lot to the body of learning about serial killers
Yeah.
that helps because he functioned for a long time. It took the police in Washington a long time to catch him, and
Hmm.
he has a very large victim list.
Oh my God.
But there's a lot of things that we have learned about serial killers or about this particular kind of serial killer
Yeah.
from Gary Ridgway. And that's one of the things that I always feel like for me as a true crimer is understanding different kinds of serial killers because as we do as a society understand them and
Yeah.
as law enforcement understands them, we can stop them faster. We can prevent them from getting started, seeing some of the issues that they have in childhood, you
Mhm.
know, catch them quicker. Be aware that there is a serial killer active because it was a while before that was even, it took a
Right.
while for people to realize in the Seattle Tacoma area that there was actually a serial killer
Yeah.
active. So
Yeah.
we've learned a lot from Gary Ridgway. So let's talk a little
Mhm.
bit about him. Do you want to tell us a little bit about his childhood?
Yeah. So he
This
was
is the place we
born.
always go, right? Like, why is this creepo the way he is?
And sometimes childhood experiences come into play and sometimes they don't. But he
Right.
does have a little weird childhood stuff.
Yeah.
He was born in 1949 in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
I was so curious because we've had so many serial killers that were Mormon. I don't
He
see
wasn't
that.
though.
He wasn't. Yeah.
No.
But Salt Lake City, took me
Mhm.
there. But no. Uh, but his family moved to Washington when he was really young, and he was raised in that SeaTac neighborhood,
Yeah,
near SeaTac Airport,
that's right.
and so he had some weird sex stuff from the time he was young,
Yeah.
and was very sexually attracted to his mother. and was a bed peer. And
Yeah.
apparently, every time he would pee the bed, she would wash his genitals clear up to the time he was 13 years old. And he's having all these weird, confused feelings of like sexual feelings towards his mother. Well, she's touching him inappropriately. Like it's gross.
Yeah.
And did that contribute to who he was? Well, I'm not going to say it didn't. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, he did have a desire to, not only was he sexually attracted to her, but he also had a desire to kill her.
Yes.
Which is probably the combo of feeling abused by her, also attracted to her.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah. He also stabbed a 6-year-old boy when he was 16.
Yeah.
He led him into the woods, stabbed him into the ribs, and had told a psychologist later on down the road that he did that because he wanted to see what it felt like to stab someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Low IQ. His IQ was in the low 80s.
Yeah.
And he was dyslexic and really struggled in school.
Yeah, he did. And that, growing up in it, just as an angry boy who felt as though he was not accepted, didn't fit. Yeah. Also, I thought it was interesting that his dad was a bus driver, and he used to complain a lot about sex workers on his route.
Mm-hmm.
So he grew up hating sex workers is really kind of the impression that I have there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, some things, but obviously
He also
more.
went to Vietnam.
Yes, he did go to Vietnam, and he did see combat in Vietnam.
Yes.
But I feel like he had some psychopathic tendencies when he was young, and then had some experiences that kind of, expanded that. Because how many 16-year-olds do you know that stab a child because they want to know what it feels like to stab someone?
I mean, that's the biggest of red flags. I mean, come on.
Huge.
That's horrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, huge red flag, and one that hopefully now we're a little more aware of, keep a little better track of someone who does something like that, but not necessarily. Mm-hmm. I think one of the problems with the Gary Ridgways of the world is that we don't really have a good system in which we keep an eye on them. Yeah. From the time that they're, we do when they're minors, because he was probably on probation and, probably had at least some eyes on him while he was a kid. But as soon as he became an adult.
Right. Then what?
Yeah. He went into the military. He went away. Yep. Who the hell knows what he did in Vietnam? We don't know.
Right. We don't know. We don't know, but we do know that his first marriage only lasted a year.
Yeah.
Because he was soliciting sex workers and had gonorrhea.
Yeah.
And so, it wasn't very long, and his new bride, who was his high school sweetheart, had enough of that.
Right. Well, and even though he contracted gonorrhea, he still refused to use protection.
Yeah.
With sex workers, which, again, there's a real lack of empathy for other human beings from him, even his own wife. Mm-hmm. Like, he probably gave her gonorrhea, like, what the hell?
All of his wives, he was married 3 times, and all of his wives said that he had an insatiable appetite for sex, that he wanted sex multiple times a day, and that he wanted them to come have sex in like public places, in the forest. After they started finding all these bodies, after they tied him to them, ex-wives were saying, oh, well, he made me go with him and have sex with him in that area. Like, this was all like intertwined together, all of his stuff. Oh yeah. Can you imagine his poor ex-wives? My God.
No, I can't. They had to know something was up with this dude, but just not exactly sure what was up with this dude. Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit through his timeline.
Yeah.
He started killing in the 70s. Just trying to remember when he murdered his first victim. Sorry, I have had a migraine today, you guys. And his effect. Oh, okay. So I guess I'm off. 82 to 98. That's a damn long time span. We should be doing better than that by now, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much freaking better.
Yeah. So,
Well, I mean, we do typically because of DNA,
right,
which
right. And DNA
becomes
is
ironic in
ultimately,
this case. Yeah.
yes, it really is. So on July 15th in 1982 is when his first victim was discovered, and that was Wendy Caulfield.
Hmm.
She was 16. She was found floating in the Green River in Seattle.
Hmm.
And over just the next few weeks, they would find 4 more bodies around that river.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of the point where they start thinking, we seem to have a serial killer at work here.
Hmm.
So that's when they set up the Green River Task Force, because they call him the Green River Killer, because that's where his first kills were found. This is in King County in Seattle, or in the Seattle area in Washington. And they just keep finding more bodies.
Hmm.
And they were finding these women that had been sexually assaulted and murdered. Over the next 2 years, they find more than 40 women.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Detective Reichert, who was the lead on this case, said every time you found a body, it was like being hit on the head with a baseball bat, because they were so frustrated with, he just is obviously continuing to kill and they have nothing.
But also in 1982, look who got arrested. Yeah, for guess
Yeah.
what? Crimes associated with frequenting sex workers.
Right. He
They
was kind of
had
in the
him.
periphery. Yeah.
Yeah,
They had him a few times,
2 times.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
before they really had him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first time that they questioned him is in 1983.
Yeah.
And they ask him about Marie Malver, because he's known, he's had this arrest now. He's known to be frequenting prostitutes in the area. And he said he didn't know any of the victims, and they didn't really have any evidence to connect him, other than on the day that they questioned him, he had scratch marks on his arm from Marie Malver, and he just kept his arm out of sight the whole time they talked to him. And after that, he burned his arm with battery acid to cover those scars.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So they talked to him, but they don't have anything on him, but they're wondering. So then in May of 1984, he freaking passes a polygraph. Again, we know polygraphs not super helpful.
No.
Not admissible in court, and
No.
you get stuff like this where Gary Ridgway passed his, and yet he's still killing all of these women.
Yep.
And the reason that he had one, he actually contacted the police himself and wanted to help out, because he knew that they knew that he was frequenting prostitutes. So this was his way of subterfuge that really worked.
Yeah.
Because he had a polygraph where they asked if he killed any of those women, and he said no, and he passed.
Yep.
So what the hell, So they just keep working, they're working on trying to catch him. And in 1986, Ted Bundy steps forward and says he thinks he has some information about this case. I find this very interesting, because they didn't reach out to him. He reached out to Reichert about it and said that he thought he had some information. So Reichert went to Florida, where, Bundy was obviously on death row at this point. And he said that he was pretty sure that whoever this killer was revisiting his victims and having sex with them.
Yep.
Which did turn out to be true. Creepy.
But it was
go
public
ahead.
service.
Right.
He was visiting his victims and having sex with them, necrophilia, because that would help to slow down his appetite to have sex with live ones. So he was saving
Yeah.
lives, guys.
Right. He was also trying to kill fewer people so he would have less attention on him. But yeah,
Yes.
it was like, oh, I was helping out by not
Yeah.
murdering as many young women.
Yes.
Well, and Bundy, I did a little more research into this, and really the theory is that um, Bundy saw a lot of himself in Gary Ridgway, and also that he just kind of felt left out. That he was a caught and convicted serial killer, and this guy was still out there having fun, and so at least he got to be involved somehow.
Yeah.
But he did end up being correct
Mm-hmm.
about that, which
Yeah.
is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us then to 2001. And remember, started in 82.
Yeah.
So way too long.
19 years later,
Yes.
multiple task forces later,
Yeah.
a pretty interesting period of working with Ted Bundy later, because they did actually work with Ted Bundy for a time, because he was already in prison,
Yeah.
because he's a serial killer.
Right.
And Bundy was helping them to put together a profile of who the killer might be.
Right.
And
Right.
also, with all of the insights he provided, again, kind of helped us start putting together a more concrete idea of what serial killers operate like.
Yes. Yeah. It was helpful. It really shed a
Mhm.
lot of light on Bundy himself, but yeah, and
For
other
sure.
serial killers too.
Yeah.
Definitely helped with profiling. So in 2001, DNA got a little better by then.
Yeah.
So they went through all their evidence and they rinsed all the fingernails of all of the bodies that they had
Mm-hmm.
to try and find some trace evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to find a few sperm clinging to one girl's pubic hair, which that is so gross. And I am so
Mm-hmm.
sorry I even had to say that out loud. However, he had given a saliva sample in 1987, back when he was being a real servant to the public, doing his
Yes.
polygraph to make sure that they knew it wasn't him.
Mm-hmm.
And he matched 3 victims.
Yep.
So that's when they do finally arrest him. He's 52 at the time, you guys.
Yeah.
He's been going since he was in his 30s. It's just horrifying.
And that's what we know of.
Right.
He could have started before that. He could have been killing people in Vietnam for all we know.
Right. This is just like very in a very, kind of a small geographic area.
Yeah. Well, also Dave
ahead.
Reichert is one of the investigators. He's the one that really wants to do DNA. This is brand new tech at the time, and he's like, let's do it. Let's take a look. He was one of the very first investigators on the Green River Killer.
Right.
And then was off it for quite a while, but had just never been able to really be off of it, right? Because this is your community, and
he's the one that went and talked to Bundy.
Yes. And you're watching all of these people being murdered. And, anyway, so he's the one who finally gets DNA going and finally gets the match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine if you started out on a serial killer case like this, you would never be able to let it go as an investigator. How could you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Could never let that go.
No.
I know I couldn't.
No.
So in November of 2003, he pleads guilty. And he pleads guilty to avoid the death penalty. And at the time, he pleads to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder.
Yeah.
He said, I killed so many women, I had a hard time keeping them straight.
Yeah.
He did admit that he killed most of his victims in his house or truck before disposing of the bodies, which I found interesting because where were his wives around those,
Yeah.
In most cases, he did not know his victims' names. He did not see them as human beings. This was definitely And something else that they learned from Bundy through all of this is, that he
Mhm.
doesn't see them as people. His
No.
victims aren't humans to him.
Well, and so many of them were discarded in places like landfills or near landfills and things
Yeah.
like that. A lot of them were discarded and covered with garbage
Yep.
and stuff because truly they were just throwaways to him. They were garbage to him.
Sometimes multiple bodies were discarded at the same time.
Mhm.
And a lot of them were only found once they were bones. And so they had so little evidence to go on.
Yeah.
Just, ugh. He also said, most of the time I killed them the first time I met them, and I do not have a good memory for their faces.
Yep.
Yeah.
However, these are their faces.
Yes.
Most of them.
There are still, I think there are still 2 unidentified.
Well, there's one that was actually identified this year.
Oh, that's right. There were 2.
Mhm.
Now
The
now there's only
youngest
one left.
victim, and this was Wendy Stevens. She was from Denver. She ran away, went to Seattle. She was reported missing in 1983. She was 14.
Oh my God.
Her remains were found about a year after she was killed. So yeah, they're still working on this case. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they want to identify all of his victims and give them their faces and names back because he took that from them.
Yeah.
He did say that he chose sex workers because they were easy to pick up without being noticed. I knew they would not be reported missing right away and might never be reported missing.
Yeah.
I picked prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted without getting caught.
Yeah.
Sadly, he was wrong about that, but he was also right about that because he was sure able to kill a lot of them before he was
Oh
caught.
yeah. Well, and clear back in the 80s when these murders started and they were started identifying them as sex workers, there were 2 main areas that the women were from in the Seattle area. One was called the Strip, and the other, I believe, was downtown. But at any rate, as police were heading down to these areas to talk to women, of course, they had a really hard time getting them to talk to them and
Right.
trust them because they didn't trust them.
No.
This case to me makes the case for legalizing sex work because in so many ways, I mean, from the very beginning, we have this man who is having sex with all of these sex workers and he has gonorrhea, and doesn't care. Then it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything to him. And in legalized sex work, things like that aren't allowed to happen. But more than that, this breaks my heart how many of these girls were 14, 15, 16, children that had run away from home and were living on the streets and were sex workers because why? Because it was paying. It was keeping the food in their mouths.
Right.
It was probably also keeping drugs in their body, to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but this case to me as I was listening to it, I went, this is why sex work needs to be legalized in this country.
It is.
Because so that we actually know what's happening and so that these women, when they started interviewing women, it was horrifying how many of them said, oh, well, maybe it's this guy. He picked me up last, month or last week or whatever and took me out in the woods and raped me viciously. It's happening to all of them, not just by him.
Because they can't report because what they're doing is illegal. So they can't report. They don't want to talk to the police. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Legalization and regulation brings safety.
Yeah.
And it also means that people aren't afraid to talk to the police if they're, and report if something bad is happening. But,
right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so effing tired of these gross men who think that because young women are working in sex work, that they don't matter as human beings.
Yeah.
Or that anyone working in sex work doesn't matter as human beings. No, that's wrong. That's 100% wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gary Ridgway is the poster child for that.
Oh, yeah.
Ugh. Well, he was ultimately sentenced to life in prison, 48 life sentences.
Mhm.
to be conserved consecutively with no possibility of parole. I was in King County, and he is still in prison.
He was transferred, I guess, for a while to Colorado.
Uh,
And people in Washington were like, no, he gets to come back here and continue to face the music. And the public
sure,
outcry was enough that they brought him back to Washington,
that's good.
partly because there are still open cases. There are still discoveries being made. So he doesn't just get to waltz off to another state that might be a better situation.
Right?
Initially, he was in solitary for a long time for his safety when he first went
Oh,
to prison.
I am sure. Gosh, having been active for that long, you can't, you can only imagine how many people were in prison with him that maybe knew someone he killed,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in that area.
yeah. Ugh.
It's sad to me though that I don't know that I don't know how I feel about this that Washington State has to pay to house this moron for the rest of his life
Yeah.
because he was 52 when he was arrested. So he's
Mhm,
got a lot of life left.
mhm.
He's not he's, older now, but still he could live a lot longer.
Yeah. Yes, he
And
could.
and it's very possible that he actually killed more than 71 women.
Yeah, totally. He
They may
says he
still
doesn't really
continue.
seem to know. Yeah.
No, he doesn't. And so over time with DNA, old cold
Mhm,
cases could be attributed to him
mhm.
because he
Oh,
doesn't actually
definitely.
even know. He didn't know the names of his victims, you know?
Yes. Here's a concern, though.
Mm.
At the time, every murder that came up, they were like, well, there you have it.
Hmm.
Green River Killer. Green River
Yeah.
Killer strikes again. Yes, he committed a ton of murders, but it still makes you wonder if his murders became a wastebasket for other people's murders too, because it was very
Yeah.
easy to just say it was him.
Well, and it is easy because so many of these bodies weren't discovered until they were bones
Yeah.
and they had no evidence and he can't
Mhm.
even give their names. And so he's basically
Oh,
pled
I have no
guilty to
idea.
a number.
Yeah.
And yeah, someone else could have been functioning at the same time as him
Yeah.
and gotten away with what they've done because everything got attributed to him. I think there
Mhm.
are fears of that for some people,
I think there
particularly
should be.
people
Yeah.
who really focus on and specialize in serial killers. Like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, we don't actually have. There's only DNA evidence on 3
Mhm.
murders.
Yeah.
So,
Now, he says he probably killed 71, and he's probably not wrong. There's probably more than that.
but he
But
also says he's not
still,
100% sure if that's the right number.
yeah. Yeah. I know. That worries me. The whole time I
Mhm.
went through this investigation, I kept feeling like some of these weren't him. Some of them weren't him, and he's going to get
Mhm.
it's easy to pin them all on him and have a clean slate. And I don't care if he gets them pinned on him. I mean, yes, put him in prison forever. The death penalty was probably fine for this guy, right? But
Yeah.
but if other killers walked free because of it, that's really scary.
Right. It is. It is. And certainly one of those things we won't know. He's been touted as one of, if not the most prolific serial killer in the US.
Yeah.
Not true. Samuel
No,
Little's head count, I think, is at 103.
right. He can be one of for sure, but
One of,
he
yeah.
didn't come anywhere near Samuel Little. No.
No, but Samuel Little was a real, you know, behind the scenes kind of serial killer because
Oh yeah.
nobody knew how many
Yeah.
people he had killed.
Yeah.
It's because he killed people all over the U.S.
Mhm.
We will never know how many for
No.
sure Samuel Little has killed.
No.
But that could also be true of Gary Ridgway.
Yeah. Yeah. Blah. I can't imagine living in that area during that time and constantly seeing in the news more bodies turning up. Like, can you imagine how that must have felt?
Horrible, horrible.
Yeah.
It had to be terrifying. I'm sure it felt horrible as the task force also. Like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
well, here's another body, and yeah, you guys are doing a great job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and there was so much scrutiny of the police and of the task force, and
Oh,
it was rebuilt multiple times. People lost their jobs, they were reassigned, nothing worked. And yeah, the police were made, public mockery was made out of them because they weren't getting the job done.
mm,
And people that forensics or not forensics, but criminal psychologists and people that were analyzing this case from the outside looking in were writing books and op-eds and stuff, criticizing the hell out of them and the way they were doing things.
oh
It just
yeah.
well, and maybe they deserved it. I'm not saying they didn't, but wow, what a horrible, horrible case to have to be involved in.
Most definitely, most definitely. And I think the only thing that we can do with a case like this one is learn from it. They
Yeah.
learned a lot about Gary Ridgway. One thing they learned is that serial killers can pass polygraph tests.
Yeah.
One of the things you got to think about is he has no emotional reaction to these murders. He
Hmm.
doesn't feel bad about them. He doesn't have guilt or shame that might show up
No,
in a change in physical response.
not at all.
I think that we need to be really careful with polygraph
Hmm.
testing of serial killers because they do not have the same kind of physical and emotional response
Right.
to
Yeah.
dishonesty as, non-psychopaths.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we learned a lot from Gary Ridgway and continue to, which is good.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
but
he's
wow.
given lots of interviews over the years. He has not sat
Mhm.
silent. He's given lots of interviews to
Well, sure, he's
people
got to be in the
writing
limelight
books and
somehow.
yep, and interviews and things. Some serial killers don't, they won't speak to anybody, but
Mhm.
not old Gary, which is good
No,
because the more we can learn from him, the better off we are moving forward. But yeah,
for sure.
this case, my God.
Yeah, pretty. It's got a big yikes factor, that's for sure.
It does.
Yeah. Well, that's Gary Ridgway, you guys. This is Monday. We will be back with 2 more new cases this week.
Hmm.
Plus, tomorrow night, so this will be Tuesday, and it will be the 14th of September. We will be doing our very first True Crime Cold Read party. So, this is our new membership that you can join on YouTube. And if you join, then you are invited to come to the live stream on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Mountain. You can throw cases at us,
Yeah.
and you can throw every member gets to throw one case at us per
Yep.
cold read party, and we will do a cold read on it in the
Hmm.
live stream. So we're going to do our very first one tomorrow night. So
Yeah.
you can join that just by going to our homepage on YouTube and clicking join, and then you'll see what our membership options are there. And it's the very
Hmm.
first one. If you are already a member of Spirit School, you get this for free. This is just a
Yep.
bonus for you. So
Yeah.
you can come as well. We're really excited. This will be our first one, and we want to
Yeah.
grow this. And it's hard to get to every case everybody wants us to do. And we thought this is another way that we can do that, and do some cold reading. So I think it'll be really fun.
Me too. I'm very excited to see what comes.
I am
What
too.
cases come. Yeah.
Yeah, what cases come? Are we going to get some famous stuff?
Mhm.
Are we going to get a
Well,
lot of
or
just
stuff that
local to
people
somebody's
know
community stuff?
personally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was my thought. Yeah.
Yeah, like personal, like you knew this person, they were in your family or they lived in your neighborhood kind of thing.
Mhm.
Whatever you want to bring us, you got to bring us a couple of sentences of information, and you have to have a question. What is your question about this case?
Yeah.
And we will give you our answer. So
Yep.
we're very
That'll be great.
excited about that. Yeah. And then, of
Yeah.
course, Wednesday we have our Wednesday night case update, our live stream, and our psychic hour live stream on Thursday. That's also our live stream there as well.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, we're going to have a lot of fun this week. So
So much good
be
stuff
sure
coming.
to
Yeah.
hang around, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys know it. We are True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. Thanks for being here.
Take care.